welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to a brand new edition of the Cannon Fire Podcast. I'm your host, as always, Rhett Matthew. Joined alongside me, my good buddy and co-host, the Philly Bucs fan himself, from BucsNation.com, Evan Wanish. And we are coming to you guys just a couple hours removed from an action-packed, literally action-packed first day of joint training camp practices between the Tampa Bay Buccaneers and the New York Jets. We'll get you all the latest updates from that and more over the next 45 minutes to an hour. But before we do that, Evan, how you doing, my friend?
Doing pretty good. Obviously, we got another week of football coming up here, so I hate to start the show every single time like that, but it's football's back. You're starting to get into the swing of things more and more. I think in the first preseason game, you're still dipping your feet a little bit, but now we're starting to get into practice every day and injuries to cover and storylines and this and that. So it's always fun.
Yeah. It's definitely an exciting time of the year as you get back into the groove of things. And unfortunately today, before we get into any of the fireworks, we got to talk about an injury update. Pretty substantial injury update for our man Russell Gage, who seemingly cannot catch a break. Went down in practice today with a non-contact injury, and immediately everybody was like, hey, this is pretty serious. We wish him nothing but the best. We wish him a speedy recovery. So that leads everyone to believe that more than likely this is going to be a season-ending injury for a guy that played through the entire season last year, plagued with injuries. We talked about the potential upside. The Bucs brought in Russell Gage going into last offseason, signed him to a 3-year deal worth $10 million a year, which is pretty pricey for a number 3 wide receiver on the surface level of things. But the upside that this guy had coming from Atlanta was something a lot of people held out hope for, including myself. I have given Russell Gage the benefit of the doubt, and I really thought this was going to be a productive year for him to at least look like the player that he used to, or at least, some semblance of the guy that we signed from Atlanta. But unfortunately, it doesn't seem like that'll be the case for him. Just a bad break. There was a Buccaneer staff member who said, quote, they heard it happen, which is just awful. So obviously we wish him a speedy recovery, but for the Bucs now, all eyes are going to shift on the wide receiver room, because when Mike Evans and Chris Godwin are healthy, it's great. But a problem for this wide receiver room the last couple of years has been the drop-off in talent after Chris Godwin at wide receiver too. So we talked a lot after the first preseason game about guys like Devin Tompkins, Trey Palmer playing well and stepping up. Well, their job just got that much more important throughout the next few weeks here.
Yeah, no, it definitely has. And just like you said, tough thing for Gage, and a big hole that the Buccaneers now have to fill. I'm gonna go not really on a rant, but kind of just something I just gotta say, where is the compassion gone in sports? Because all I've been seeing is, well, he's a waste of money, this and that, this and that. Do you think he wanted to get hurt? This is his life. He was in tears on the cart. These people are humans too. And the first reaction by everybody is, what a waste of money. This was a bust. Yeah, see, I told all you guys. Why do you have to have that reaction? Just be a human first and put yourself in his shoes. This is his job. He can no longer do his job for a year now. And his time in Tampa Bay may be over. That may be all she wrote for Russell Gage. Did the deal pan out? No. It hasn't panned out. You can acknowledge that. But the first thing I'm seeing is people just reacting that way, and I just don't think it's right. So it's a gruesome injury. It's the worst injury you can have, and it sucks. And there's just zero compassion. And I think it's sort of this thing on social media, and sports fans nowadays are much more aware of contracts. They're much more aware of deals and pay cuts and this and what players make and what, because you have access to all that stuff now.
Much
30 years ago,
much more transparent than it's ever been in the history of the NFL.
Right. 30 years ago, you didn't have as much access to what, freaking Derek Brooks was making, yearly. But nowadays, people look at it not as a player, not as a human, but as an object. Oh, you're costing this much, you're not even on the field. Just have a little bit of compassion. it's a tough injury for Gage. It's tough for the team, and they're gonna have to move on, obviously. But like, just have a little bit of compassion for the guy. That's all I'm saying.
I agree. I think most people do know how to generally split the player from the game, but unfortunately for the people who don't know how to do that, that's what you get. But definitely compassion is what we're sending here from the Can of Fire podcast to Russell Gage. Hope he recovers. And, as unlikely as it may seem at this very moment, I would like to see him suit up as a Buccaneer once again. You never
Yeah.
know. Still has another year left on that contract, so we'll see if he can play at least one full season while he is under contract for the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. But before we get into the details of joint practice, I wanted to bring up some of those wide receivers we had mentioned. Devin Tompkins been in the mix. Trey Palmer from Nebraska. Dave Moore, obviously, I think the only experienced option the Bucs have left when you look at wide receiver depth. Played a little bit under Dave Canales in Seattle. So those are the top three names. At least two of those guys are really going to have to step up and not play beyond their means, but definitely play harder than they had planned to over the next couple of weeks, because it seems like right now we're going into the season with an extra wide receiver spot now open.
Yeah, and the, everybody talks about, add a veteran, add a veteran. Look, a few things. One, David Moore could qualify as that veteran. Like, he's been in the NFL for a few years now. Like, he's been in the NFL, I think, for 5 or 6 seasons. So like, he would qualify as that veteran. And two, this isn't the Tom Brady era anymore, and they don't have any money. Like they don't have any cap space. Like, Jarvis Landry's out there. Who on this Bucs team is convincing Jarvis Landry to play for the minimum? Tom Brady isn't here anymore. Like, it's just that it's not going to
Oh,
happen,
you don't think
right?
David Baker is still cool?
Like, okay, maybe not for the veteran minimum. Like, these guys are going to want to get paid, and also, like, I think the Bucs like their group. I do. I think the Bucs like their group, and I I've been impressed with Trey Palmer. Obviously, he had the big preseason game. He had a huge day today at the joint practice. Beat Sauce Gardner for like a 60-yard touchdown, really already stepping up in the absence of Russell Gage. So, honestly, and it's kind of not really funny, but maybe ironic. I actually had the thought the other night. I was thinking about Trey Palmer and stuff, and I was like, I was like, this is probably going to be Gage's last year with the team. So, like, for the future, like, I think the top three wide receivers are going to be Godwin, Evans, and like Palmer, or whatever Evans got, whatever. I wouldn't put them in order, but like, I think those could be the future top three receivers. And here we are, and it could be right now. It could end up being like literally this season. So I do think a guy like Trey Palmer is going to have to step up. A guy like David Moore is going to have to step up. Devin Tompkins, maybe. So it opens the door for, if you didn't think the Bucs were going to carry 7 wide receivers, it opens that door for maybe a guy like Raheem Jarrett if he can get on the field. It opens the door for a guy like Cade Warner, maybe if he can get on the field and be productive. It does open the door for a few of those guys if they do still decide to keep 6. So I am interested to see it. I think Trey Palmer and David Moore, I think their spots are pretty much locked in now. Like, especially with this news, it's not official, but like, all signs point to, like, Russell Gage is not going to be coming back this season. So, big opportunity for Trey Palmer and David Moore for sure.
Yeah, we spoke after the first preseason game, that Trey Palmer touchdown. They interviewed him post game, and one of the things that he said is that the moment was not too big for him, right? The bright lights being on, a stadium full of people, even opposing fans being as loud as they were. It was not too big for him. He was able to step up into the moment and perform, and that's something else we were going to be looking at as far as these joint practices go. The level of competition that you play day to day, the intensity factor is going to be cranked up a notch, and we'll talk about that here in a second as well. But a good quote from this week, our good buddy Tampa Bay Trey pointed it out on Twitter, and I thought it was pretty good here. Bucs wide receiver Trey Palmer said he's not concerned about going up against Sauce Gardner in practice this week. Says it's, quote, no name, no face. And then today at practice, huge deep ball completion for 60-plus yards and a touchdown from Kyle Trask to Trey Palmer. He beat Sauce Gardner in coverage on the play. Mike Evans also came out and said today is the best day he has ever seen Trey Palmer have at practice. So a lot of high praise for the kid that already is off to a great start.
Telling you, like Trey Palmer was my favorite draft pick from that draft class. Like I didn't think he had any business being available in the 6th round. And when the Bucs were able to get him and like they traded up for him, so like they clearly believed in him too. I think he's good, man. Like I think you're gonna see growing pains if he does play a lot this year, but I think he's good. Like I just I don't know if he's gonna be a superstar, but like this guy, what you were going to ask him to do as a third wide receiver, I definitely think he'd be able to handle it like right away. So, he's one of the players again. Like I am pretty curious and excited to watch for on Saturday because I'm just now that the Gage news by Saturday it's gonna be official.
Yeah.
And like the Gage news, like Trey Palmer's gonna basically know like his what role is at stake here, and now maybe he can get comfortable in that spot. So, I am very I was before training camp I was excited to see him, and now as the games go on and stuff I'm just I'm getting more and more excited about Trey Palmer for sure.
Absolutely. And if nothing else gets you excited for football this week, I think all the fights coming out of joint training camp is going to do you some a little bit. We called it earlier this week. One of my favorite things about joint practices this time of year, not only is it just god awful hot outside, even all the way up in New York, but you get tired of facing the same guys in practice every single day. And so when you get a new face in front of you, it's almost like everyone goes a little bit harder to maybe prove a point. And we certainly saw that on full display today. It was such an action-packed day that not only did Levante David get in 2 separate fights, but Anthony Nelson had a pick 6. When's the last time you seen Anthony Nelson have a pick 6 at practice?
Did you see the video
Yeah.
of the pick 6? Yeah, it's just thrown right to him. A nice throw, Zach.
Yeah, it was beautiful. So, I mean, before Levante David even got involved, I think there were 3 or 4 skirmishes between the Bucs and the Jets. One of them happened during the special teams period. A couple more happened during 11 on 11. I think even, warm-up stretches, these guys were out there chipping at each other. Devin White got chippy with an O-lineman. As I mentioned, Levante David got himself in a fight. Big-time fight between Levante David and Jets O-lineman Billy Turner after David got a tackle for loss. Both were aggressively pushing each other as other teammates got involved. And it's interesting because you do not see that from Levante David very much. We talked more about over the years he's taken on this role as a vocal leader. And, Ryan Smith was a guy who came on here and said before that he is fit into that role pretty well and leads by example, but he got out there and he got busy. I mean, there have been a lot of fight-filled practices before. A couple of years ago, we had Antonio Brown full-on punch a guy and make national headlines that day over at training camp. Another scuffle after that, another fight. Josh Hayes and a Jets wide receiver tried to wrestle each other down to the ground. Another big scuffle after that. And then another fight for Levante David. It was with cornerback Brandon Eccles. Apparently, David was enraged. He was held back by Ryan Neal and Will Golston. Some good sportsmanship here and there between Aaron Rodgers and Devin White. That was a highlight. But, I mean, you want to talk about an intense practice. This is this has probably been a nice change of speed for some of the new guys on the roster. But it was a very eventful day out there.
Well, the funny thing to me is that the reason it was supposed to be the joint practices were supposed to be 2 days, it's supposed to be today and tomorrow. And one of the reasons the Jets cited for canceling tomorrow's practice, the Bucs are still going to practice and the Jets will practice. They just won't practice together. Is that the Jets said that normally on the second day of these joint practices is when things start to get chippy. Well,
Yeah.
they decided since they didn't have a second day, they were just going to beat the crap out of each other on the first day, I guess. So
you got to hit your quota.
Yeah, and now they're going to take it out on each other on Saturday, which it's always funny to me, and I don't know, maybe it's because a game is more organized, but you don't see these skirmishes in games.
Right.
You hear about it like you would if they had a joint practice tomorrow. You'd hear like, oh, yep, there's 3 more fights today. Then on Saturday, there's going to be nothing. Like it's just, I don't know. Maybe it's just you can get penalized during the game, and maybe you hold you restrain yourself. I don't know, but it's always funny to me. I'm like, you hear all these joint practices and all these fights, and then when it comes to the actual game, and you can legit hit somebody, nothing happens. It's always very funny to me.
Yeah. There was another skirmish that we forgot to report. Luke Gedeke and Jermaine Johnson got into it. And an update that I'm just seeing now, not sure if we've heard anything else from it, but Robert Hainsey also walked off to a separate field with a trainer. So for the Bucs already at this point, expecting to go into the season with a second string center and Robert Hainsey, it's not a great look. Where are we at with the Ryan Jensen deal? I know we spoke on that a little bit last time we talked to you guys, but haven't got any concrete updates from him. Obviously, no practice for him this week, and there's more and more people reporting that the expectation is the Bucs are going to go into the regular season without him out there. So with Hainsey being hurt today, obviously not a great sign, and that offensive line depth, specifically at center, starts to become even more of a question mark.
Yeah, I'm and we got a super chat. I'll get to that in just a minute, but I'm starting to sound the alarm on the Ryan Jensen thing. It seems like he's going backwards. I had, and you can, August 16th right now, clip it, whatever. I have my doubts on whether we're going to see Ryan Jensen or not this year, or whether we'll see Ryan Jensen ever play for the Buccaneers again. Like I'm starting to have serious doubts. I really am. It's scary because like they're locked in for next year on his contract. And it's not a cheap contract, but it's just, that's not the way you wanted things to trend. And right now, I don't have any inside information or anything on that, but my gut feeling is like, you're not going to be seeing him for a long time. I'm starting to really get concerned that his like career is in jeopardy here.
As much as I hate to say it, it gives me shades of what happened to Todd Gurley, how it was just kind of I don't even know if this is the same thing as what's going on with Jensen, but it was almost like
Gurley never
like
had a major injury like Jensen did, though.
Yeah, but it was like a degeneration. Like it kind of just wore him down, and I don't know what it is, but like you said, it feels like he is going in the wrong direction because there was a little bit of padded activity. Now, again, no full practice for Jensen, no 11-on-11 activity since camp has started, but he has been out there in pads doing individual drills, doing one-on-ones, but ever since he left, he has not been back.
No, he's not.
Has not been out there outside of street clothes. Has barely even been doing any one-on-one work if he is out there in just regular clothes. So, like you said, it doesn't feel great, and I start to get this feeling that I don't know. I mean, even if he had elected to have the surgery, I know a lot of people are going to be hung up on that, and that's the biggest thing is that everyone's going to say, "Well, he should have had the surgery. He would have been back, and he would have been fine by now if he had the surgery." I don't know if that's the case. There is a guy that I see online who claims he has sources, more than likely Ryan Jensen's dad. But he claims he has sources, and he says that electing for surgery probably would have ended Ryan's career. And the natural rehabilitation route that he took was probably for the better. But again, the other question that gets begged is how much did that playoff game against Dallas affect him? Should he have even come back to play? Is that what ended his career prematurely? Because it obviously meant the world to Ryan Jensen to play in Tom Brady's final game, but it doesn't make a lot of sense for people to see him sit on the sideline for a year, play in the biggest game of the year, and then once another 8 months goes by, he's taken a step back from where he was during that playoff game.
Right. Yeah, it's getting a little bit worrisome. So we do have a $5 super chat from Jonas Goria. Thank you very much. Trying to get us some Wendy's today. Gage's body gave up on him. It stings for the Bucs, but it's more unfortunate than he being bad. Wishing him the best as well. Yeah, I mean that's that's the thing. It's and everybody's like, "Yo, it was definitely it was a waste of money and this and that." That's okay. And like the point isn't anything about football. Like it's not anything about football. It's just like, can we take a minute and just feel for the guy first before we're gonna start trashing his contract? Which case he had no control over. Like he had, like he didn't demand the Bucs give him that contract.
If that's the logic we want to have approaching Russell Gage and his contract situation, then let's take it all out on Tom Brady for leaving us with 40 mil.
Yeah, I guess.
I mean, you can't have one thing and not have the other. If that's the way people are going to operate.
But as for Jensen, and then obviously, Hainsey, don't know. We'll have to wait and see if he practices tomorrow. If he, doesn't practice tomorrow, I have to wait and see if he plays on Saturday. I don't think they have practice on Friday. So with the game on Saturday, I don't think they would have practice on Friday. So we'll have to wait and see. But I mean, Nick Leverett's been getting work at center during training camp and even during the first preseason game. So he's gotten some work there, but definitely a situation worth monitoring there.
100%. And I hate to say it because it does sound awful. But when you talk about some of the injuries that we have just discussed, Russell Gage, obviously, but Ryan Jensen, I think, could maybe soon be put in that category. Listen, I don't want to doubt the guy because I don't think anyone expected him to suit up and play at all last year, and he did. And hats off to him because I don't think his presence really made a difference in whether the Bucs were going to win or lose that playoff game. But I'm glad that he got to play, right? I think he's just at that age, man, where it's not like this knee is going to be better than it was before the initial injury.
No,
he's what, 33 years old. That's a ripe age for an NFL lineman, an NFL offensive lineman, an NFL center, and especially an NFL center that's as physical as Ryan Jensen is. You know, his play style.
He's currently 32. So 32-year-old that just had, they didn't call it that, but basically almost a torn ACL, I guess. It wasn't completely a torn ACL because he wouldn't have been able to come back at all.
Yeah.
But like they never really called it anything, which was honestly one of the weirdest injuries I can remember. Not good though. And now, like I said, he's going backwards. So definitely worth monitoring the center position for this season, but then also the future, because like they may have to be finding a new center here, even with Ryan Jensen's cap hit on the books for next year.
Yeah. So we wanted to preview the game on Saturday between the Bucs and the Jets. Not going to spend too much time talking about the Jets offense, but I did want to talk about the quarterback who is expected to start this game. That is Kyle Trask, who, as we mentioned, hit a 60-plus yard touchdown pass to Trey Palmer over Sauce Gardner. So he's got to be feeling pretty good today. But we know in the past that a really good week of practice has not done Trask a lot of favors. So what are your expectations for him headed into this game? Seems like he'll have most of the same supporting cast he had last time. Maybe a couple of better receivers and maybe a better pick at running back. But for the most part, same offensive line, most of the same receivers. And if they rotate while he's in the game, probably the same two running backs he had the week before. But what do you think? Can he go out there and change some people's minds?
I don't know. I just think he had all this positive momentum built up from the practices, right? And then you go out in Pittsburgh versus Pittsburgh, I mean, and Mayfield looked good. And then you come in and it looks like every other preseason.
Looks like what people expected.
Yeah.
Looks like what people were expecting.
So, I mean, the offensive line didn't do him any favors. Like the offensive line was bad. He didn't have much time. Like they didn't do him any favors at all. But it's starting to seem like, okay, like we tried to make like this storyline, like, oh, Trask is playing better. Like, but in reality, it was always like, yeah, Mayfield's going to do well. And like, and I had read somewhere that like apparently in the past preseasons, Mayfield has done pretty well also. Just something about it, like it just plays well in the preseason. Yeah, it's great for him. Like when you're in a quarterback competition, like playing well in the preseason is great news. So as far as Trask goes, I'm interested to see. Okay, so Todd Bowles has not confirmed this, but that was the rumor. You know, Pewter Reports, J.C. Allen reported that Mayfield was going to start with the starters in Pittsburgh, and then he was right about that. And he also said that Kyle Trask would start the second game with the starters. So we'll see if he's right about that one as well. And I'm curious to see what starters are there? Is there going to be more? Are you going to have Mike Evans, Chris Godwin out there, Kate Otten, Rashad White, maybe Tristan Wirfs? Like, what's our definition of starter? Does it matter that they didn't have 2 days of joint practices? They only had one, because I know those teams really value those joint practices a lot more than the actual preseason games. So now that you had one less, do you maybe throw out a few more starters that you otherwise wouldn't have or weren't planning on? So I'm curious to see, okay, he's out there with the ones. What exactly does what does that entail? So I'm curious to see what his supporting cast is going to look like. And yeah, this is his last chance. Like I mean, this is it. If he goes out there and
If Baker
basically
if Baker
has
outplays
the
him this
same.
week,
It doesn't matter if
yeah.
Baker outplays him. If Baker could be bad, but if Trask is bad, guess what? Guess who's still in the lead? If it's even on week 2, Baker's currently in the lead, so he's going to stay in the lead. And I think before that third preseason game, this is just my gut feeling that the Buccaneers are going to announce a starting quarterback. I think they're going to do that before the third preseason game. So it's do or die time for Kyle Trask right now. I mean, it really is. He needs to go out there and just play well. Don't worry about what Baker's going to do. Just worry about yourself and go out there and play well. And I am, like I said, I'm still curious to see what his supporting cast is, specifically on the offensive line, because I think having a guy like Wirfs out there would help. But at the same time, do you want to risk injury? So it's a slippery slope, and I'm curious to see him yet again, and I'm curious to see Mayfield again. So can he replicate his performance again? Because we saw Trask got more work than Mayfield did. So I would imagine that it'd be almost the same. I imagine Mayfield now is going to get more work than Trask does. I mean, on Saturday. So that's going to be interesting to see. And yeah, it feels like we're coming to a head though with this quarterback battle, and it feels like this is Kyle Trask's last shot to really be like, hey, no, this is still a competition, or is it going to be like by the end of Saturday night we're gonna know, like you're just gonna know, like oh, like maybe this is gonna be close, or it's like yeah, it's Baker, like you're gonna know, and we'll see what happens.
I agree, in the fact that by the end of the second preseason game, I think we're going to have a pretty good feeling of who the Bucs will name QB1. Also, just like you said, I agree that it'll happen before the third preseason game. Now, a point that I had heard this week, and I wanted to bring it up because I thought it was a pretty good example. I know that for the last 2 weeks, we have kind of beat the drum that, like, hey, this is an open quarterback competition. It is not a foregone conclusion, which is technically correct because the Bucs have not named a quarterback. But I think the first game of the preseason may have done our buddy Kyle in. But former Tampa Bay Buccaneer offensive lineman, not quarterback, Ian Beckles chimed in on his podcast this week and basically said, Baker's going to start because at this point it makes sense. It just makes sense. It makes the most sense. Even going back to before the open quarterback competition discussion we were having on this show, it made sense. Because if you're the Bucs and you're moving on from Tom Brady and you come into this season, if Kyle Trask is your starter week 1, and for 4 weeks in a row he plays like garbage, is it going to make people feel much better to get Baker Mayfield as kind of a consolidation gift week 4, week 5? If Baker goes out there and he proves his doubters correct and he plays like crap,
you can put Trask in.
You can put Trask in, and you can feel better about writing that all the way to the end of the season. From an optics perspective, from, I guess, a game plan perspective, but from a perspective to where the fan base can collectively buy in, I think if Kyle Trask is going to get any meaningful playing time, unfortunately, for the first time in his NFL career, it's going to have to come from taking someone's job, whether that's through injury or Baker just playing his way out of the starting job. I think as of right now, that's the only chance Trask has to be the starter of this Bucs team.
Well, and here's a big reason why. Okay, the Bucs really like Todd Bowles, but I have to imagine, I don't think his seat's hot, but I think Todd Bowles' seat is warm. If you're entering the season on the warm seat, it can get pretty hot pretty quick. And are you going to really roll with a guy who's never had an NFL start? Never had a start in his NFL career in the regular season? Or are you going to go with the former number 1 overall pick? Yes, he's had his struggles and stuff, but there's more experience there. There's less risk for Todd Bowles to do that. And just like you said, and I've thought about that too, like it's much easier to go from Baker Mayfield to Kyle Trask rather than Kyle Trask to Baker Mayfield. It's a completely different dynamic. It would be a completely different tone shift, because if Kyle Trask starts, they go 0-3, you decide to make a quarterback change. Okay, you bench the young guy for the journeyman who couldn't beat out the young guy to begin with. I think, yeah, Todd Bowles' position, he has to be like, I got to start Baker. Like, I have to, because if I don't, things could get really bad really quick if things with Trask don't pan out, because you could always play that card, right? Of week 8 comes around, no, Glazers, don't fire me yet. We're going to put Trask in and see how he does. If Trask is already the starter, they're going to be like, there's nothing else for you to play. So I do think that's another big reason. Todd Bowles knows that there's going to be pressure on him this coming season, that he has to, I'm not saying he has to make the playoffs or has to win 10 games, but like, you got to be competitive. Like, if the Bucs get 4 or 5 wins, I have a hard time seeing him come back. Like, I think he needs at least 6 to come back, and coach his team in 2024. So to me, in his mind, what would maybe give the best chance to win? To me, it's the guy with the more experience, and I think Baker Mayfield fits that bill right now.
And our buddy G Vegas in the chat brings up a good point. He says, and with the perception of the NFC South being weak, I think at the very least, Todd Bowles has to have competitive divisional games. That's what you're looking for. I mean, not only are you going up against 2 incredibly young rosters in Atlanta and Carolina, and you would hope that best case scenario, this sounds awful after where we were a year ago, but you would hope best case scenario, you can split the series with both of those teams, right? I mean, one would think that even though none of these teams are poised to be Super Bowl runaways, it should be a competitive division in the NFC South. And if it's as weak as people say, then it should be no problem for Bowles in this defense to step up and at least be competitive.
You should be able to split with all 3 teams.
Yeah.
I think you should be able to split with all 3 teams. That's 3 wins right there. Then you play teams like the Texans, you play teams like the Titans, you play teams like the Colts. Like, you're playing some struggling teams, or maybe like perceived to be struggling teams, and you can maybe take advantage of that. The Bears, who knows what they're going to be? The Packers now have Jordan Love. They might take a step back. There's opportunities there, but yeah, like, those divisional games are just huge. And you look at what the coaches did, the previous head coaches that were fired, like not Bruce Arians, but like the Dirk Cutters and the Lovie Smiths and Greg Schiano's. What's the big key? A lot of them didn't win their divisional games, and it matters so much. And like, 2 things that matter the most: divisional games and basically December. Like, when you're looking at Bucs head coaches, the head coaches that have gotten fired typically have brutal Decembers because the team just gives up and then it's time to move on. So Todd Bowles needs to do both those things. One, he needs to have his team ready to go to be able to win at least half of the divisional games. If you sweep somebody, great, and you can go 4-2, whatever. But I think you gotta split with at least all of them. And then you have to be able to maybe not go undefeated in December, but you have to still be playing competitive football in December. I think that's 2 things that the Glazers are going to be keeping an eye on. And yet again, if you're looking at both quarterbacks, Baker probably gives you the best chance to accomplish both of those things.
Well, as far as week 2 of the preseason goes, sky-high expectations for quarterback Kyle Trask. Hopefully he can live up to them and do some positive for his own namesake, because as we talk, it is still an open quarterback competition. So he's got some time, but he's got to do a lot of good in that short period of time. So let's talk about the other side of the football as we start to wrap this thing up. We talked before about the battle at the nickel corner position with the absence of Sean Murphy-Bunting. There are some other guys looking to step up. Veteran D. Delaney is involved. Josh Hayes is back there as well. And Christian Izin, who I believe are a couple of rookies. Hayes and is it Eisen?
Christian Izien, I believe.
Christian Izien.
So, yeah, Izien is an undrafted free agent out of Rutgers. And what's interesting is Todd Bowles even said, like, he's the current front runner for the nickel job. So, looks like the Bucs could have found their answer there.
Yeah, Todd Bowles had a lot of good things to say about Izzy and said, quote, he's tough, he's quick, he is a heady football player. I like the way that he flies around out there in pads. We know he can tackle and blitz. We know he's quick enough to cover. As he picks up the system, it'll be great to see what he does going forward. We really like the guy. And the way that he's described there, he is a heady football player. If you've paid attention to how the Buccaneers have used their nickel safety over the last couple of years, it's going to take a heady football player to go in there and basically play up to the expectations of Todd Bowles, because they're going to have to be a dynamic player, I think, at least a little bit. So, something like that coming from head coach Todd Bowles, not only is it a name not a lot of people expect it, just because, D. Delaney's still very much a veteran, but it's some pretty high praise coming from the head ball coach.
No, it definitely is. And I don't think before camp, I don't think anybody really had their eye necessarily on a guy like Christian Izien to be the starting nickel guy. I mean, I really didn't. He played a lot of safety at Rutgers, but they're looking for answers right now, and they're taking a shot. So we'll see. Now, just because he's the front runner, that's the front runner, right? That can change. And there's 2 more preseason games. Izien's going to play in both of those, and I guarantee you, every single player that's in that competition for that spot is going to play in those games. So could it change? Absolutely. But it does speak volumes that the head coach is saying those things about that player, and it's clear that they really like him. So we'll have to wait and see how he does. And how he continues to perform, but so far it's been so good, and I I think it's, like I said, just very telling that, I mean, he was going to come out after the first preseason game,
Yeah.
the first one, and say he's the front runner for the job. And to me, that means you're doing something right. And Christian Izien right now is the leader in the clubhouse, and we'll have to, like I said, wait and see how he does. And there's going to be some growing pains with him as well, I'm sure. It's an inexperienced player, and I'm curious to see how a lot of the Bucs' inexperienced players perform this season.
Yeah, talking about inexperienced players and potential growth. What's going on with Zion McCollum? I know he was wrapped up in this conversation before the first preseason game and had an interception in that game, but also had a lot of bad things on tape as well. So now he kind of finds himself in a weird spot where he's going to have to fit in somewhere in this defensive backfield. We're just not sure where yet. He's a guy that, these joint team reps are going to be that much more important to him, as well as he looks to have a big game on Saturday night. But Zion McCollum, what are your thoughts on him headed into the second game?
Well, I think the Bucs have basically determined he's more of an outside guy. I don't know if they think he can be that successful inside, and maybe that's why you haven't heard his name much anymore. Much involved with the nickel corner spot. I think they've just, from what they've seen and everything, I think they've made the determination that his best spot's probably on the perimeter, and not inside. And I mean, inside it's tough. It's a different. It's the same position, but it's different. You're going up against a different type of player. There's going to be more space. You're going to be going over the middle of the field a lot more, and sometimes it's tougher. And not all guys can be successful in that role. So I think they have basically made that determination. And if Carlton Davis or Jamel Dean go down, I would assume Zion McCollum's probably the first one off the bench to replace one of those guys on the outside. But I do think he's going to be more of an outside guy. I think if it's an absolute emergency, I think he can play inside, but I think they would prefer to keep him out there.
One more thing I wanted to highlight before the game on Saturday. We know that the Jets, their defensive line is probably a little bit better at rushing the passer than Pittsburgh was. So I'm curious where the state of this offensive line is, because I think a lot of people were let down as far as where we think this O-line is after that first preseason game. They came out while Baker was out there. They looked okay. And I think a lot of people were pleasantly surprised. And then you started to see the lack of consistency as they fell apart in the second, third, and the fourth quarter. Now, I don't know how many starters the Jets are going to have out there. It is the second game for everybody, so load management is very real. But I have to believe they're going to put up more of a challenge than Pittsburgh did, just based off of sheer talent, especially if you're playing the starters. So for a guy like Luke Gedeke, if he rolls out there as your starter at right tackle again, he's probably going to be the most watched man in the building, aside from Kyle Trask on that first drive for the Bucs.
Yeah, we mentioned it last episode. Like, he's got to bounce back. Like, you don't have to be perfect, but you got to be better. And yeah, he wasn't very good, and hopefully he can, like I said, he can bounce back from it. Same with Cody Mauch. I mean, he wasn't as bad as Gedeke, I don't think, but I mean, 2 penalties, he's definitely gonna want to clean them up. And I don't think the Bucs definitely haven't given up on Gedeke. I haven't either. I mean, I think it's one game, but like, it wasn't a great first impression.
One game at a new position. And it's,
Right, right.
it's
But
not like going from right guard to left guard or vice versa. I mean, you're going
right.
from interior to you're a starting tackle.
And while he did play that at college, it was at Central Michigan. Like, it's a little bit different than playing the Pittsburgh Steelers. Just a little bit different. So, uh, you know, I don't think they're in any rush to replace him. I know the fans are going to be frustrated with him. I don't think they're in any sort of rush to do so. So he's going to be your starting right tackle for the foreseeable future. Obviously, I'm not saying it's going to be years, but at least this coming season, unless there's an injury or he is just like literally one of the worst offensive linemen in the league, I don't see a way he's going to be replaced. So I think fans just don't want to be harsh, but like kind of just got to deal with it, honestly, and just you got to deal with the growing pains and hope that he can overcome them and become a solid starter.
Yeah, don't hold your breath. I mean, he very well could be the worst lineman in the NFL this upcoming season. We don't know. Well, we'll find out when the rubber meets the road, but I have not given up on him yet. I think he can show some sign of improvement from his rookie season because, let's face it, that was a rough rookie season. So he's got to be at least a little bit better, one would think. But if he's not, it could be one of the most least fondly remembered tenors in Tampa Bay Buccaneers history for an O lineman. I feel like if he sucks ass this season, then like I don't know what they're gonna do with him. Like if you suck at both guard and tackle, then I don't know if you have a spot on this team. But I don't know.
Center.
I don't know. Yeah,
they might need a center.
So you never know, man. Before we go, we do just have an update. This just dropped from pewterreport.com. It is a potential update on the Russell Gage injury. During Wednesday's joint practice between the Bucs and the Jets, wide receiver Russell Gage was injured after a non-contact injury. Based on the initial reactions from both him and the players kneeling down, it did not appear to look good at first glance. Further reports have confirmed the severity of his injury as he left the field in tears. Jeremy Fowler of ESPN said, source, Bucs wide receiver Russell Gage will miss the 2023 season with a knee injury suffered today versus the Jets. That sucks. It really does suck. So obviously we send out our best to Bucs wide receiver Russell Gage. Just an awful break. We said it at the beginning of the show, and I hate to ruin things on damper here, but just a guy that we're always going to talk about. In my opinion, I think we're going to talk about the untapped potential of what could have happened, what kind of player he could have been if he could have just stayed healthy. And unfortunately, it happens to a lot of players, and Russell Gage the latest for it to happen to. But now we get to see who steps up. Devin Tompkins, Trey Palmer, Dave Moore still very much in the conversation. It's going to be interesting. It'll be a fun game on Saturday night. Kyle Trask hoping to do some work with those red-hot wide receivers, and of course, we'll keep you updated on any position battles along the way. The next time we talk to you guys, it'll be this weekend. Maybe it'll be Saturday night. More than likely, it'll be Sunday, I think. But yeah, that's the show. Thank you guys so much for checking out this week's game preview episode of the Cannon Fire Podcast. Follow the show on social media, Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. All of those are Cannon Fire Podcast. Best place to go for updates on the show. And, of course, Tampa Bay Buccaneer news as it happens. Speaking of Bucs news as it happens, you can follow my co-host Evan on Instagram, Bucs_daily. You can also find him on Twitter at EvanNFL and check out his written work at BucsNation.com. Anything for this week?
Yeah, I think I'm going to be taking a look at maybe some potential replacements for Russell Gage if the Bucs do decide to free up some cap space and go the veteran route. So be on the lookout for that. And then also my players to watch will be out sometime before the game on Saturday. So
good stuff. Last but not least, you can find myself Instagram and Twitter at Redicus, RHETTAKUS. If you follow me, I will follow you back. Shout out to the live chat over on YouTube today. Willie Beeman, the moderator, G Vegas, Adam Davies from Bucs UK. Thank you guys for holding it down. Family First, Sal319, Dan Gugino, G Vegas, Frank G, Christopher Cole, Gary Buff, and anyone else that I may have missed. We truly appreciate your support and look forward to giving you guys some more Bucs news the next time we talk to you. I'm your host, Rhett Matthew, signing off for my co-host, Evan Wanish. We'll talk to you in the next one. Until then, and as always, thank you for listening, and go Bucs.